Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we continue our Salamanders week focus with the Masters of the chapter. Spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the Warhammer 40k novel Nocturne by author Nick Kyme. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. For many of us out there, the 40k universe has been a part of our lives for as long as we can remember. For a lot of us, it is a hobby and passion begun when we were kids. For me, it was a random Space Crusade box set given on Christmas. And well, here I am decades later, sharing my love for that universe still. And one of the great things about a setting so developed, rich and established is that you have these characters that echo out across the lore, names that stick with you. A Marneus Calgar, Ragnar Blackmane, Dante, Azrael, names that have been with me since the beginning. Yet there are so many more characters out there. Names that, while not quite as prominent front and centre, are no less legendary. Names and exploits you may not come across unless you're diving into a novel, or maybe a small background mention within a codex. And for the Astartes in particular, many of those are the more unsung chapters as well, such as the Salamanders. While yes, they may be a part of the hallowed first founding, they most certainly fall outside the main spotlight. So when you get those moments or references of these other characters, it's always something great. And there's a moment within the novel Nocturne where we don't just get to glimpse one of these characters of the Salamanders chapter, but a convening of its masters. A moment within the lore that is truly, truly special. Now, this assembly comes about due to a librarian named Dakir becoming far more powerful than anything the chapter has seen before, and more ominously, quite possibly being the chapter's prophesized doom. And thus, Chapter Master Tushan calls together the lords and masters of the chapter, the senior ranking commanders, to debate how to proceed. And so, within a grand chamber, the Council of Salamanders is formed. Captains Malsbar of the 5th and Drakgard of the 6th were present. Both wore artificered suits of power armour, the latter favouring a hood of chain instead of scale for the ornamentation of the shoulder guard. Their drake pelts were old and gnarled. Despite their reserve company status, each carried honour markings from Badab and Armageddon, and wore them proudly. Drakgard's souvenirs from those campaigns extended to a crippling facial injury that had torn up his bottom lip, revealing one side of his teeth even when his mouth was shut. By contrast, Malsbar was unscathed, but had a broad brow that shadowed his eyes and gave him a perpetually disapproving expression. Their battle helms were sitting on a stone table that arced around the seated area in a ring, and stared coldly at the accused with dead lenses. The eyes of the reserve captains were equally stern. The two captains were joined by another. Daktir, the master of the fleet and 4th company, appeared pensive as he regarded the prisoner. Like all of the chapter's pilots, he bore the honour brand of the dactyl over his right eye, albeit this one's tail was longer, and it had a greater wingspan than his comrades to denote his vaunted rank. Its meaning was Lord of the Burning Sky, and only the captains of the 4th were ever allowed to bear it. His left eye was augmetic, the bionic aperture tracking back and forth as if examining the accused. Now, I'd never even heard of some of these characters before, yet somehow They manage to immediately have that weight to their presence. That gravitas. It's a fantastic piece of writing. Just the mere introduction of these captains somehow manages to bring to life the legacy of their service. The centuries of battle, the hard-won victories and sacrifice, in the name of the chapter, the name of Vulcan, and the name of the Emperor. The look in their eyes, the scars they bear. You feel that experience. You feel they have been tested in the fires of war, and they have passed through with the sheer resolve of Vulcan. Again, some of these names you may recognise, others you may not. For example, Captain Molspar was named in the Salamanders Codex supplement a few years ago, whereas other captain names were different. However, the Tome of Fire trilogy is fairly old school lore now, and differences between novels and codexes isn't uncommon. One name who is sure to be recognised is the captain seated beside them, the captain of the Third, Adrax Agatone. Now, Agatone arrived on the tabletop a few years ago with an absolutely stunning model. And I never actually realised at the time, but he is actually a character introduced in the Tome of Fire series. So, having since read that trilogy, it's really great seeing this tabletop character in a new light and brought to life. You don't get much of a description of Agatone here, as he's actually a consistent minor character throughout the trilogy, so he doesn't warrant quite the same form of introduction here. However, if you're a fan of Agatone, I definitely recommend checking out the Tome of Fire trilogy, as though again he is far from the main character, you are able to follow his rise from Sergeant to Ultimate Captain, and you'll get to grasp the calm, consistent demeanour the man has. Honestly, I really found myself appreciating the journey that Agatone went through the ranks as I was going through the trilogy. Now, though the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th company captains were present, of course, as always with the nature of the galaxy, some remained absent. Both Mirsan of the 2nd and Prebian of the 7th were away on active campaigns, and so their seats remained empty. However, in ordering this council, Chapter Master Tushan's presence dominated the hall, and we got a brief glimpse of the Chapter Master and his inner council. As well as being Regent, Tushan was also Captain of the 1st, but sat alone. The Chapter Master leant back, chin resting on his massive fist, deep in contemplation. It was hard to discern the details of his finely wrought armour, but Dikir knew it was magnificent. Curls of drakescale unfurled from his back and draped over the granite steps of his throne. His bearing was not unlike the tribal chieftains of ancient Nocturne. At his right hand was Praetor of the Fire Drakes. The bald-headed veteran sergeant was armour-clad like the rest. Unlike the other masters, he was ramrod straight, his thunderhammer and storm shield within easy reach. Perhaps Praetor would be Dakir's slayer then, should something go wrong and the other Fire Drakes fail to act in time. The veteran was the contingency. Elysius sat to the Chapter Master's left. The chaplain wore his skullplate for the occasion, armoured in the black of the Reclusium. His fingers were steepled, gauntleted digits overlapping bionics. No one had been as battle-ravaged as Elysius. He'd lost his arm during the Battle of Scoria, and nearly his faith out on the Volgara Reef. If rumours were to be believed, the chaplain had endured all trials and appeared stronger than ever. All the masters of the forge were absent, so the positions normally occupied by the armoury went empty, which left only the librarius. Dekir's gaze fell on Velkona last of all. He saw nothing in those pitiless orbs. An utter void of emotion. Pragmatism ran through the Master Librarian's veins like flows of ice. Now, the thought of Tushan leaning back on his throne, immersed in shadows save for his burning red eyes, is nothing short of epic. Honestly, even as a Space Wolf guy, you have to admit the Salamanders have by far one of the best looks of the chapters. The bright green armour, the flames and fire, the drake scale, the charcoal black skin and volcanic red eyes. They just look like complete badasses. And if you know anything about them, well, you have to say that they are. How symbolic is Tushan's throne sitting apart from the rest? Because that's the burden of every chapter master. Because no matter what, at the end of the day, they are alone. They are always apart. No matter how much confidence they have in their captains, no matter how much trust, or even how much they like them, there is only one who is always truly accountable. One who the burden of history weighs on. The legacy of their Primarch, the Chapter Master. And we'll of course discuss Tushan some more later in the week, because it would be hard not to. The guy's an absolute legend. But it's great here to see those mentions of the unheralded champions of the chapter, the ones whom he depends on so greatly. Praetor, veteran sergeant of the First Company, right hand of Tushan and de facto commander of the Fire Drakes in Tushan's absence, standing on eternal vigilance by Tushan's side as ever. While Praetor technically is one of the lowest ranks in the chamber, he has a reputation second to none. And you can feel that by him remaining ramrod straight, with his shoulders out proud. Elysius, chaplain of the Third Company, and in many ways the conscience of the chapter, has truly been tested upon the anvil. He's a man who lost his arm, and was separated from his chapter within the webway, and yet he survived it all to be reunited. He's absolutely one of the Salamanders I'd most love to see upon the tabletop, as well as Chief Librarian Velkona. Velkona is such a contrast to your prototypical Salamander. Even here in this brief description, you can feel it. He saw nothing in those pitiless orbs, an utter void of emotion. As Chief Librarian of the chapter, perhaps Velkona alone feels a measure of that weight carried by Tushan. For as Chief Librarian, it's his responsibility to counsel the Chapter Master, to guide the Chapter Master through unprecedented times, to harbour the knowledge of the chapter's history. Velkona isn't some complete departure from the spirit of Vulcan as you may expect. He cares for the chapter's survival, and the ways of Nocturne. But he has seen firsthand the betrayals of chaos, losing one of his librarians to the ruinous powers. And so yes, maybe he is changed. Maybe he is more bitter, colder than you may expect for a salamander. However, wouldn't it be perhaps stranger indeed if he hadn't emerged harsher or colder? But regardless, he remains one of Tushan's closest advisors, and rightly so. He is a true son of Vulcan and an immensely powerful psyker. Velkona is hands down one of the biggest assets in the Salamander's arsenal. And that is the Council of Tushan, the senior commanders of the chapter. All of course save one, the Forge Father himself, Vulcan Heastan. The man who stands apart from his brothers, not due to the weight of responsibility a la Tushan, but for being the man who bears the Primarch's name. Stan is actually here in this meeting of the council. However, he was, as so often, apart and within the shadows. But he too has an interesting relationship with the chapter master, and one we will focus on and discuss this week too. However, I really wanted to discuss this conclave today, as these kind of moments are so rare. The coming together of these warriors of legend is something that you virtually never see. Even for a main chapter such as the Ultramarines, for example, so rarely do we get to see all the captains and chapter command in one place. So to get this kind of moment for the Salamanders, to feel the weight of the moment and appreciate the legacy of these chapter heroes, is for me something pretty special, and something deserving of discussion. Again, like I said, you can just feel the lives of these figures drawing you in, coming to life around you, immersing you in the chapter. And you have to think, in a way, these kind of moments must resonate with them too, for they live lives of war, and the moments they actually get to assemble in each other's company are most likely fleeting at best, decades and maybe even centuries apart. So yesterday we spoke of the chapter's relationship with its people, and today we discussed the figures who guide the chapter through the darkness. Though their road is hard, the life and eternal battle, I think Vulcan would be proud of the chapter he's left behind. The captains and figures who continue to guide it in his name. But as always everyone, what do you think? Like me, do you love to see these moments of chapter command coming together? Do you find it even more special when it is the chapters so rarely seen? Would you love to see more of the commanders of the Salamanders chapter? And if so, what characters in particular? Like me, do you have a fondness for Velcona, the chief librarian, the contrast to your standard salamander nature? Or perhaps is there another who piques your interest? How much credence do you feel Tushan would place on the opinions of his captains? Do you feel he would weigh their opinions heavily? Or do you see a stubborn streak akin to some other chapter masters out there, such as a Logan Grimnar for example? And when it comes to the assemblies of chapter command, which other chapters out there would you love to see this happen with? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.